The beginning, every empire begins with a story, and Rome begins with a legend. According to myth, two brothers, Romulus and Remus, were abandoned as babies left to die by the river. But fate had other plans. A she-wolf found them, nursed them, raised them. From death came destiny. Romulus would go on to found Rome in 753 BC after killing his own brother. A violent beginning for what would become a violent empire. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire before modern nations. Before global superpowers, there was Rome, a civilization so powerful it shaped the world we live in today. Roads, laws, architecture, government, all roads led to Rome. But here's the question history still asks. How does something so powerful collapse? How does a civilization that ruled the known world fall into silence? Today we tell the full story, the rise, the glory, and the fall of the Roman Empire. The legendary beginning. Every empire begins with a story, but not every story begins with blood. Rome's does, long before marble temples rose, before legions marched across continents, before the name Rome inspired both fear and admiration. There was only a river, a whisper of fate, and two abandoned children. The story begins along the banks of the Tiber River, a quiet but powerful stream cutting through the wild lands of ancient Italy. Tiber River, it was not yet the heart of a great civilization. There were no roads, no empire, no glory, only scattered tribes, dense forests, and a world where survival was uncertain. The river flowed endlessly, calm on the surface, yet hiding danger beneath. And on one fateful day, it carried a secret. Two infants, helpless, defenseless, placed inside a crude basket. Their cries echoed against the wind. These were not ordinary children. They were Romulus and Remus, born into danger, marked by destiny, and rejected by power. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, was a Vestal virgin, sworn to purity. But she had broken that vow. Or perhaps she had been chosen by something greater. She claimed the father of her children was Mars, the Roman god of war. Was it truth, or a desperate attempt to protect them? No one cared, because in the world they were born into power feared prophecy. At the time, the region was ruled by a cruel king named Amulius. Amulius, he had stolen the throne from his own brother and ruled through fear and control. When he heard of the twins, he didn't see Barbies, he saw a threat. A prophecy whispered that these children would grow and overthrow him. And so, like many rulers driven by fear, he made a brutal decision: kill them. Even executioners sometimes hesitate. Instead of shedding innocent blood, they chose another way. They placed the twins in a basket and set them adrift on the Tiber River, left to the mercy of water and fate. The river carried them slowly, silently through reeds and currents. The basket rocked gently, a fragile vessel between life and death. Cries of the infants grew weaker. The sun rose, then fell. Night came, cold air wrapped around them. It should have been the end. But destiny does not obey human decisions. From the shadows, something moved, a creature of the wild, a predator, a hunter, a she-wolf. Her eyes glowed in the dim light. Her steps were slow, cautious, drawn by a sound she did not understand, not prey, not threat, but something different. She approached the basket. The Barbies were silent now, weak, barely breathing. The wolf sniffed them, paused. And then something impossible happened. Instead of devouring them, she lay down beside them, gently, protectively. She nursed them, fed them, kept them warm. In a world where humans had abandoned them, nature became their mother. That moment, the she-wolf nursing the twins would become one of the most powerful symbols in history, a symbol of survival, of strength, of something wild and unstoppable. Rome would later see itself in that image, not born from comfort, but from struggle, not raised by kindness, but by resilience. Days passed. The twins grew stronger, their cries became louder, and eventually they were found. A shepherd named Faustulus discovered them near the riverbank. Faustulus, at first, he thought it was a miracle, then a responsibility. He took them home. His wife Acalarentia raised them as her own. They were given no royal titles, no special treatment. They grew up like ordinary boys, but they were anything but ordinary. As they grew, their strength became obvious. They were faster than other boys. Stronger, braver, they led games, fought off thieves, and protected others. Even as children, they commanded respect. But there was something else. A fire inside them, a restless energy, as if they were meant for something greater, but didn't yet know what. Despite their bond, Romulus and Remus were not the same. Romulus was bold, decisive, dominant. Remus was sharp, questioning, unpredictable. They loved each other, but they challenged each other constantly. It was the kind of rivalry that builds strength, and sometimes destroys everything. As young men, the truth of their birth began to surface. Whispers spread, stories connected, their royal blood, their mother, the betrayal, everything came to light. And with it a purpose. They were not meant to live as shepherds. They were heirs, warriors, leaders, and they returned to reclaim what was taken. The twins led a rebellion. They confronted King Amulius. And this time there was no mercy. The same fear that drove him to abandon them now returned to destroy him. Amulius was overthrown. Justice was served, and their grandfather Numita was restored to the throne. But for Romulus and Remus, that was not enough. They didn't just want a throne, they wanted a legacy. They decided to build a city, a new beginning, a place that would reflect their strength, their story, their destiny. But even here conflict followed. Where should the city be built? Romulus chose one hill, Remus chose another. It seemed like a small disagreement. But when ambition meets pride, nothing stays small. To settle the dispute, they turned to the gods. They watched the skies for signs, birds appeared, but they interpreted them differently. Romulus claimed victory, Remus disagreed, tension rose, words turned sharp. And then everything changed. In a moment of anger, in a clash of pride, Romulus killed Remus, his own brother, the one who survived the river with him, the one raised beside him, the one who fought beside him, gone just like that. And so Rome was born, not in unity, but in division, not in peace. In blood, Romulus stood alone, victorious, but marked. He named the city after himself. Roman became its first king. He built its walls, organized its people, created its first institutions. But the shadow of what he had done never truly left. From its very beginning, Rome carried a pattern: power through conflict, growth through struggle, unity forged in division. It would conquer nations, expand across continents, dominate the known world. But its foundation would always echo that first act. Brother against brother. Was it just a myth, a story told to inspire, or a deeper truth about human nature? Because Rome's story is not just about one city, it's about power, ambition, destiny, and the cost of greatness. From a single act of violence, an empire would rise. From a pair of abandoned children, a civilization would be born. But legends are only the beginning, because the real story of Rome is far more brutal, far more complex, and far more unforgettable. From kingdom to republic, Rome did not start as an empire, it started as a kingdom. But power corrupts. In 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their king, and something new was born. The Roman Republic, a system where power was shared between elected officials and the Senate. For the first time, Rome belonged to its people, but beneath the surface, conflict was already growing. The rise of power. Rome was not built on peace, it was built on conquest. The Roman army, disciplined, ruthless, unstoppable, they marched across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, turning cities into provinces and enemies into subjects. Rome grew richer, stronger, unstoppable, but with growth came danger. Because the greatest threat to Rome was not outside, it was within. The fall of the Republic. Empires do not collapse in a single moment. They crack slowly, quietly from within. Rome did not fall because of one man, not even because of one war. It fell because power began to change hands, from the many to the few and finally to one. For centuries, the Roman Republic had stood as something extraordinary, a system without a king, a balance of power. A structure built on laws, elected officials, and shared governance. 2 consuls ruled at a time, so no single man could dominate. The Senate advised and controlled policy. Assemblies gave citizens a voice. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Until Rome grew too big, Rome expanded beyond imagination. From a small city to a dominant Mediterranean power. With victories over Carthage in the Punic Wars, Rome gained wealth, land, and influence. But expansion came with a hidden cost. Wealth flooded into Rome, but not evenly. The rich became richer, the poor became poorer. Small farmers, once the backbone of Rome, lost their land, slaves replaced them, power began to concentrate, and with it came ambition. The Republic was no longer run by humble public servants. Now it was controlled by powerful individuals, men who commanded armies, wealth, and loyalty. Generals no longer fought just for Rome, they fought for themselves. Among these rising figures were men like Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius reformed the army, allowing the poor to join. It changed everything, because now soldiers didn't fight for the Republic. They fought for the general who paid them. Loyalty shifted from the state to the individual. Sulla marched on Rome itself, an unthinkable act. Roman armies were never supposed to enter the city. But he did. He seized power, declared himself dictator, and ruled with fear. His enemies were hunted, executed. Erased, it was the first time Rome tasted internal terror. And though Sulla eventually stepped down, the damage was done. A line had been crossed. After Sulla, the Republic still stood, but only in appearance. Behind the scenes, everything had changed. Power was no longer balanced. It was contested, fought over, seized. And among the men rising in this chaos, one name would stand above all. Julius Caesar. He was brilliant, charismatic, relentless, a man of vision and ambition, born into a noble family. But not the richest. He climbed the political ladder with intelligence and strategy. But Caesar understood something others did not. Power in Rome was no longer about laws. It was about influence. To rise faster, Caesar formed an alliance, a secret political pact, with two of the most powerful men in Rome, Pompey the Great and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Together, they controlled Rome. This alliance became known as the First Triumvirate: 3 men, 1 goal, power. Caesar was given command of an army and sent to Gaul. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. For nearly a decade, Caesar fought, conquered, expanded Rome's territory, but more importantly, he built something else. An army fiercely loyal to him, not to Rome, to him. Caesar returned victorious, celebrated, admired, but in Rome there was fear, because a man with that much power and that much loyalty was dangerous. The Senate grew uneasy, especially one man, Pompey, once Caesar's ally, now his rival. The alliance collapsed. Crassus died. Pompey aligned with the Senate, and Caesar was ordered to give up his command, return to Rome as a private citizen. It seemed simple, but it was a trap. Without his army, Caesar would be vulnerable, prosecuted, destroyed. He had a choice: obey or resist. In 49 BC, Caesar made his decision. He stood at the edge of a small river, a boundary, a line that could not be crossed. The Rubicon River. Roman law was clear: no general could bring an army into Italy. Crossing that river was treason. It meant war. Caesar looked at his men, then forward, and spoke the words that would echo through history: Alia iacta est. The die is cast, and he crossed. Rome was thrown into chaos. Civil war erupted. Caesar vs. Pompey, brother against brother, Roman against Roman. Cities burned, armies clashed. The Republic tore itself apart. Pompey fled, but Caesar pursued him. Relentlessly, Pompey escaped to Egypt, hoping for refuge, but instead he found betrayal. He was murdered. His head presented to Caesar as a gift, but Caesar was not pleased, because this was not victory. It was tragedy. Rome had lost one of its greatest men at the hands of its own. With Pompey gone, there was no one left to challenge Caesar. He returned to Rome not as a general, but as a ruler. He was declared dictator, first temporarily, then longer, and finally dictator for life. Caesar began reforms. He improved the calendar, reduced debt, expanded citizenship. He was efficient, decisive. Effective to many, he was a savior, but to others, he was something else. A king in disguise, and Rome hated kings. In the shadows, a group formed: senators, leaders, men who believed they were saving the Republic. Among them, Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar trusted, a man he cared for. They planned in secret, waited, watched, and chose their moment. March 1544 BC, the Senate. Caesar entered unaware, or perhaps unwilling to believe the danger. The conspirators surrounded him. At first, it seemed like a petition. Then a blade flashed, one strike, then another. Chaos erupted. Caesar fought back, but there were too many, and then he saw him, Brutus. And in that moment, everything changed. Narrator slow, emotional. Et tu, Brute. You too, Brutus. Not just pain, not just betrayal, but realization. If even Brutus had turned against him, then it was over. Caesar stopped resisting and fell. Caesar lay dead at the foot of the Senate, a man who had conquered nations. Brought down by his own people. The conspirators believed they had saved Rome, saved the Republic, but they were wrong, because the Republic had already died. Rome did not return to peace. It descended into more chaos, more violence, more war, because removing Caesar did not remove the problem. Power had already shifted. The old system could not be restored. The fall of the Republic was not caused by one man. Not Caesar, not Pompey, not Sulla. It was caused by ambition, by inequality, by a system that could not adapt to its own success. Rome had outgrown its republic, and something new was about to rise. From the ashes of the republic, an empire would be born, not ruled by many, but by one, and his name would be remembered forever. The birth of an empire. From the ashes of chaos, a new power rose. Augustus Caesar, Rome's first emperor. He brought peace, order, stability. This era became known as the Pax Romana, 200 years of relative peace. Rome reached its peak. Wealth, culture, innovation. This was Rome at its greatest. But even golden ages do not last forever. Slowly, quietly, Rome began to change. Corruption spread. Leaders became greedy. The rich grew richer. The poor grew desperate. The army weakened. Loyalty faded. Rome was no longer united. And when an empire loses its unity, it becomes vulnerable. The barbarian invasions, they came from the north, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Huns, tribes once feared, now unstoppable. In 410 AD, Rome was sacked. The unthinkable had happened. The eternal city had fallen. The final collapse in 476 AD, the last Roman emperor Romulus Augustulus was removed from power. No grand battle, no dramatic ending, just silence. The Western Roman Empire was gone, but Rome never truly died. Its ideas, its systems, Its influence still shape our world today, and maybe, just maybe, history is trying to warn us. Because the question is no longer, why did Rome fall, but could it happen again? How the Roman Empire really fell, not what you think. The rise and fall of Rome. Please don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section.